I'm Jerry Gordon, the past president of B'nai Israel Synagogue and a senior editor at the New English Review. And with me, almost across the screen so I could shake hands with him, is the new rabbi for B'nai Israel Synagogue. His name is Yehoshua Mizrahi. And I want to draw your attention to some things in the background. The flowers are nice. A couple of things at the bottom look interesting, but it's the picture of the boat on the upper left-hand side of him. And we're going to get to that story because not only is he coming to be the rabbi of post at B'nai Israel, but he's bringing his home with him. And his home is a 52-foot trawler. And that is a saga that's unbelievable, and you'll hear about that later. So, first place, Rabbi, what attracted you to accept the position at B'nai Israel Synagogue here in Pensacola?
Hi, Jerry. Well, in truth, I had three offers on the table, and my wife Sheila and I looked at all three, and the real question was where we felt we could do the most good. And after studying all three possibilities, we unanimously concluded that we could be of the most service in Pensacola.
Well, that's great to hear. So what do you consider as priorities for your post as spiritual leader of this third oldest synagogue established in Florida in 1899?
Well, certainly adult education is at the top of my list. I would like to do a lot of adult ed. I'd like to do a lot of projects in the community. I'd like to revive the preschool and the Hebrew school and attract younger families to the synagogue. All of those are very important to me. Israel advocacy is extremely important to me. And making a positive impact in the overall Pensacola community. So that our neighbors see us as friends and people that we contribute to benefit the entire Pensacola community.
Okay. You have an unusual Jewish family ancestry, Ashkenazi on one side and Kurdistan. How did that come about and shape your development of your Jewish ritual observance and practice?
Well, I'm a mutt. I'm a Heinz 57. My father's father was Kurdistani, going way back. They lived in Jerusalem since the 1700s, I'm told. And my father's mother was a first-generation Moroccan on my dad's side. On my mother's side, they're Ashkenazi, Glitzianas, and Litvaks. So I have a little bit of everything in me. Yeah, I grew up essentially with my mother's side of the family. So that I grew up sort of like an infant that was kidnapped by the Ashkenazim, and it was only later in life that I sort of got back to my Sephardic roots.
Okay. And you have beside that ancestry, how did that come about and shape your development of your Jewish ritual observances and practice?
Well, obviously there are certain customs that differ between the two cultures, and I put on my tefillin in the style of the Sephardim. I use the Sephardic prayer book, but I'm very sensitive to the Ashkenazic rituals as well because I basically grew up with them, and I know them very, very well. So just like sort of genetically, I'm a bit of a mutt. I'm very comfortable in both rituals, and but personally, I practice like what they call an Edot HaMizrach, a person, the communities of the Orient or the Maghreb.
You grew up in Lakewood, New Jersey, probably had one of the largest Orthodox Jewish communities in the state, if not in the Northeast, to be quite frank about it. But how did that impact on your Jewish education?
Well, here's the thing, Jerry. The Lakewood that I grew up in does not exist anymore. That's the new Lakewood. My grandparents, my mother's parents moved to Lakewood in 1940, and it was not like that. I was born in 63, and I came of age in Lakewood in the early 70s, and it was not the Lakewood that it is today. It was a small city of 25 or 30,000 people. It was very pleasant. It was very safe. It was an ideal place to grow up. People left their keys in their cars. The front doors were open at night in the summer. And I tell my mother, "Hey, Mom, going riding bikes with my friends." And she'd go, "Get out of here, come back for dinner." Nobody worried about, these sorts of things. It was a very, very idyllic place to grow up. But of course, as the yeshivas grew and grew and grew and grew, it changed the nature of the community. But I had left long before all of that. The only reason I go back to Lakewood nowadays is just to visit the resting place of my grandparents and my father, etc., my other relatives.
You didn't opt to enter the rabbinate originally. How and when did you decide to enter the rabbinate? And where did you get your education in semikhah, or ordination?
It's true. I wasn't planning on being a rabbi from the beginning. I actually went to medical school, but decided by my 5th year of med school in Israel, I decided it wasn't for me for a variety of reasons. And I had various small businesses along the way. But all along, I was a lifelong learner. I studied Torah. I taught some Torah as a layperson. And I'd say around the year 2003, there was a program that was offered for smicha for business people. And this was at the Merkaz Harav Kook in Jerusalem. And the idea was you'd come to the yeshiva twice a week in the evenings around your work obligations, and then you'd study the rest of the time on your own. I wound up coming back to the States before I enrolled for that program, but I came back to the States before it began. But there was another program here in the States that was distance learning, and I started studying for smicha, not because I wanted to be a pulpit rabbi, but just because I really enjoyed the material. I looked at it like a PhD in Jewish law, and I used to kid around. You'll forgive me and say, who would want the rabbi's job? I mean, having to bar mitzvah reprobates and saying eulogies over total strangers. What job could be worse, right?
Yes.
As the old joke goes, the mama says, be a doctor and accountant. The rabbi is no job for a nice Jewish boy, right? But God has a sense of humor. And I wound up backing into the rabbinate, not because I wanted to be a pulpit rabbi, but the place where I was living, there was nobody to actually do the rabbi's job, to read the Torah and to do the pastoral work. And I backed into it in that way. And to my surprise, I found I really enjoyed it. And so the rest, as they say, is history. But I began studying just for the academic enrichment of the material. And as far as the second part, I received smicha in 2013 from Yeshiva Pirchei Shoshanim, and my masmich is Harav Daniel Hanan, who has a yeshiva of his own now in Israel.
You hold both U.S. and Israeli citizenship. What prompted you to spend time in Israel, and what drew you there?
Well, I've lived there twice. First of all, it's our home. I felt very comfortable there. The first time I was there in the late 80s, I was studying medicine. And then after once the second Arab uprisings began in 2001, I'd been wanting to move to Israel permanently anyway. And as a famous rabbi said, when your mother is ill, you rush to her side. And at that time, Israel was hurting. There were almost daily suicide bombings. And so I decided to move to Israel permanently at that point. That was in January of 2002, just a few months after 9/11. And we were there for almost 3 years. But unfortunately, I had to come back to the United States for a variety of reasons. And I've been here ever since. Our plan is to retire in Israel, of course, but that's what brought me there for those two specific reasons. Israel was in crisis in 2002, much like it is now, and I had the ability to go and do something hands on the ground to help, and I did what I could.
You practice what you call holistic Judaism. What is it, and how will it distinguish you from other Jewish ritual practices?
Well, this is a copy of the book. Shameless plug for my book. And it doesn't, to answer the question, it doesn't take us out of standard traditional Jewish practices, but it's a different philosophical approach to those practices. It's an integrated approach which tries to find balance between our physical domain and our emotional domain, our intellectual domain, and our spiritual domain. And I maintain that you have to have all of those in balance in order to be an effective moral agent, a servant of God. And if they're out of balance, you really can't do much in this world to make the world a better place. So it's a lot about introspection. It's a lot about working on ourselves and developing our individual relationships with God Almighty on a one-on-one basis and cultivating that relationship and then turning that into good works in the world.
When did you meet the Rebbitzin, and what was her significant professional culinary training and career?
Well, my wife, Sheila, knew from the age of 8 that she wanted to be a chef, which is remarkable. Most of us don't know what we want to do with our lives in our 40s, right?
Yeah.
We haven't figured it out yet. But she knew by the age of 8 what her path in life was. And she pursued that. And she went to the restaurants, to Culinary Institute up in upstate New York, I think it's in Kingston, or Hyde Park. And she's worked in some of the finest kitchens in the United States. She was the first woman sous chef at the Peabody Hotel in Orlando, with the little ducks. And she's worked with Wolfgang Puck. She's worked in a lot of Zagat's rated and Michelin star rated restaurants. And her food is out of this world good, which hopefully Pensacolans are soon to find out about. So yeah. And when we met, actually, was cooking. I'm not at the same level of expertise or training as she is, but I always fell back on short order cooking when work was scarce. So where we happened to meet was actually on the line.
You mentioned the Peabody Hotel in Orlando. Happened to know Joe Blitz up in Memphis, whose family started it and has a magnificent collection of Judaica.
Oh, just very cool.
Really unbelievable. Your father had an unusual military career in the Israeli Navy. What positions did he hold, and how did that impact you growing up in a sailing family?
Well, Jerry, I'll tell you, he was not a career man. He simply, as everyone knows, in Israel, you're drafted into the service, and he was drafted into the Navy, and he did his patriotic duty and served in the Navy for, I think, 2 or 3 years. I don't know what the requirement was at that time. And then he became an Israeli merchant seaman, and that's what brought him to the United States. But we've always, growing up, we always had boats. Every summer we would spend, as much time as we could on the boat. We'd plan short trips. It was just part of our family life, having a boat. And it was just something my dad used to say, of the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe of Zebulun, were the mariners, the ancient mariners of the Jewish people. So he used to say, only half jokingly, that we must be from the tribe of Zebulun, because boating, the water is in our blood.
Well, I referenced the picture of your left shoulder of this trawler, and I've read something about it, but you're actually bringing your home with you, which is this 52-foot trawler, a motor trawler, that is home for you and the Rebbitzin. Tell us about the fantastic saga of buying the vessel from the state of Alaska and the connections with your father that took you and your family on what became a 6,500-mile trip out of Alaska to Florida.
Yes. Well, it's certainly one of the more interesting episodes in our lives. The story actually goes way back to like 1981. My father had given me this book to read called Voyaging Under Power by Robert Beebe. And this book is the Bible of long distance power boating. And in the book, the author, who was a navigator during World War II for the U.S. Navy on the USS Saratoga, he advances the idea that a small craft under 65 feet could safely and efficiently cross an ocean, any ocean, and could do it more efficiently and more comfortably than a sailboat. And in 1962, he built a boat to his own specifications and did just that very thing, wrote a book about it. But when I read that book, I was hooked, and I knew someday that I would do the same thing. And so that's, my father gave me that book, and I read it over the years many, 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 many times. When I found this boat, and for years, of course, you troll the classifieds, the boating classifieds, to see what's out there. And then one day I found this boat for sale. And this boat is actually mentioned in this book. As being one of the best examples of a vessel that is capable of crossing oceans. And so when I found it was for sale, this very boat, and it was a one-off, it was a custom build, there were no copies. I said to Sheila, I said, let's sell everything we own and drive 4,000 miles to Alaska and buy a boat sight unseen and spend the rest of our lives cruising the world. And she, having had no boating experience whatsoever, and to her enduring credit, said yes. I don't know if too many other wives would have said that, but that's precisely what we did. And we drove to Alaska, hoping for the best, expecting the worst. And yeah, it was pretty much the worst. The boat had been out of the water for 9 years in Alaska and really hadn't been maintained. And it required anything that wasn't bolted down was stolen. It didn't even have a steering wheel. So we had to, we spent a year in Alaska working hard to fix her up. States, Local 48, work on it. And that's precisely what we did. Put a new engine in her and built the gearbox. And off we went. We went down the Inside Passage in October of 2020. And we went down the Inside Passage. This was also at the height of COVID. And we went through Canada, got back to the States in Port Howard, spent about 4 months in Bellingham, Washington. And then we inched back down the coast through Puget Sound outside, down the Pacific Northwest. We stopped in various places along the way. We spent about 6 months in San Francisco. We spent about 6 months in San Diego. And then a friend of ours joined us, and from there we went to Ensenada, and we cruised down the Pacific coast of Mexico, which was wonderful. And from Chiapas, we skipped Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, went straight across the Tehuantepec to Costa Rica, and we spent some time in Costa Rica. Then we went to Panama. We waited 3 weeks to get through the Panama Canal because I told them I could not go through the canal on Shabbat. And they said, well, we're going to have to spin you and you're going to have to wait. And I said, well, we'll wait. So we got through the Panama Canal. And then from there, it was a 4 or 5 day run up to Kingston, Jamaica. And from there to the Bahamas, and Bahamas to Florida.
Wow. I say it's a saga. Final question for you. How important is outreach by you to both the Jewish and general communities in Pensacola, given the dramatic rise of anti-Semitism here in the United States and here last July in Pensacola? In the wake particularly of the October 7th pogrom in Israel that sparked the war with Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, Hezbollah, which may occur, unfortunately, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, backed by, unfortunately, a nuclear Iran.
Yes. Well, Jerry, here's the thing. I'd say two things on that. First of all, if October 7th has taught us anything, is the critical importance of Jewish unity. So I hope to work very closely with the other rabbis in town and to present a united front against the haters. But my experience has taught me something else as well, that I walk around with my kippah all the time, and I am frequently stopped by total strangers in the market, on the street, and they say, do you have family in Israel? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do, and I'm Israeli. And they said, well, we want you to know that we stand with Israel. This is cashiers at the supermarket, total strangers, customers. It happens quite frequently. And I am convinced that the vast majority of level-headed Americans support Israel in this struggle, and they understand the difference between the haters are a very, very small minority. And we don't want to give them undue weight, because the truth is they represent a very, very small group of people. They get a lot of attention, but their numbers are extremely small. And we need to reach out to all good people, be they Christians, be they Muslims, be they people of no specific religion, who understand the difference between right and wrong, and understand that it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And that they're coming, it says on the graffiti in Hebron says it very, very succinctly. It says first the Saturday people and then the Sunday people. And we need to stand together and stand strong, support Israel in its fight against frank evil. And I plan to do a lot of that in Pensacola.
Well, Rabbi, we are welcoming you along with Rebbitzin and your vessel. I'm sure that will attract potentially new congregants, but it also may attract some attention from the general community, I can tell you that much. But it has been a pleasure to meet you, and it's been a pleasure for me to interview you. And all I can say is, Hatzlacha.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Chair.